Is this an imminent deadly threat, or is somebody just not able to find a parking spot? We'll talk about a dangerous situation with noted criminal defense attorney Tom Grieve in just a moment. But first, we have a super secret giveaway going on. I can't tell you what the prize is, but it's happening right now. It's absolutely free and it ends really soon. So you click the link in the description down below and you can win something really cool. Here's a hint, it fits in a holster. Tom, I'm going to play a video of, I don't know. It just happens to be a lady driving this SUV, and she is upset.
This is every insurance salesman's worst dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's going to run you over.
And this goes on for quite a while. She is just hitting
she just tried to hit someone in that. They dodged out of the way.
Driving at people, and
Oh my God!
They say multiple agency investigation because she left the scene, and we'll see this happen here from another angle. Yeah, absolutely stunned, and I'm thinking get out of there, because not only can she hit you, but she can pin you between another car, and now it's like a bullfight situation here. And they never did tell us why, but for me the why doesn't matter. This is all about the how and what's going on with that. It just keeps going, and then we see the police chase later. This is a deadly weapon, this vehicle. I mean, you saw the damage to the front end and stuff like that. In a situation like this, had someone been there with a firearm and used it to stop her, what do you think would have happened, or what could potentially have happened to the responsibly armed person who's trying to stop something like this?
So here's the argument in favor of the use of deadly force, right? If we watch the whole video, and you've already seen it so far, the person's clearly trying to hit people. She's aiming for people. She's aiming at least probably 3,500 to 4,000 pound vehicle. It's obviously a deadly weapon. So is that person in reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm? Can you articulate that? The answer is an emphatic yes.
Well, wait a minute. What if you didn't go out there? What if these people hadn't run into the parking lot to try to protect their vehicles? She's just ramming into property then. Right.
So the counterpoint is, well, number one, are you somehow provoking her by standing there? And that's a ridiculous argument. So
Yes.
so let's just throw that out. So really the more evident counterpoint is, and again, let's just kind of make this law neutral, right? So let's throw out duty to retreat. Let's throw out stand your ground. Let's just kind of take this on an even keel, so to speak, for what's out there. Kind of a vanilla, here's what the laws are, right? And if you want to, we can start factoring them in. The issue is, and this is the argument against the use of deadly force, is exactly what you just said, which is all they have to do is stand on the other side of the cars, and they're not in at least imminent or immediate use of force. And if she circles around her car, you just move to the other side. Now, the counterpoint to that is she's still a deadly threat. Just because you can successfully evade her easily enough, at least based on what we're seeing, okay. So that's counterpoint number one. But just because you can evade her doesn't mean that it's okay, right? That's like, can you evade a slow kid with a knife who's trying to stab someone, or take out the kid part?
Yeah.
Can you evade a slow attacker because maybe they're walking with a limp or whatever the case may be, right? Or they've got some injury to their leg.
Yeah.
The second counterpoint is, well, just because these people can evade her here doesn't mean that if you go down a block, the pedestrians crossing the street are going to be anywhere near as fortunate, right?
Yeah.
So those are going to be kind of the back and forth arguments. Should somebody use deadly force, and should a prosecutor look at prosecuting it?
And now I want to start the video again, and we see that she crashes into more vehicles, and eventually here somebody tries to get into the vehicle and stop her, convince her what she's doing. But what I'm getting at is, at the end of this video, she speeds away, and she gets pulled over on the I-5, and let's take a look at the level of force they want to use. We saw the officer with his rifle out, pointed at her, and a whole bunch of cops stopped around. This is still a deadly threat in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the law enforcement officers. They're not going to let her drive at them. So, different standard for cops as private citizens?
Well, yes and no. So here's what I mean by that, is that generally speaking, you see the same criteria for justifying the use of deadly force, i.e. reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm, or however your particular state ratifies that. Occasionally, states will have special criteria for how you're supposed to evaluate something from the perspective of a law enforcement officer being different from an objective or subjective reasonable person analysis. But the biggest distinguishing factor is this, is that I, as a private citizen, am trying to basically break contact and defend myself if I am unable to do so. Law enforcement is trying to take them into custody.
Yep.
And as a result, even though it's the same law, the fact that they get much more proactive because they're trying to stop the person, take them into custody, means that the scope of what's considered reasonable for them and the scope of what's considered reasonable for me are going to be two different things, even though it's the same law. Because the same law is going to apply to the same, to what I'm trying to do, right? If I'm chasing them and they've retreated, right, now I'm the one that's probably at fault if I suddenly start shooting.
As you don't have the authority to arrest or
Right.
take them into custody as a private citizen.
So that's the reason why it's the same law, but the application winds up being different because law enforcement has a different duties.
And so absolutely. Confusing case all around when I'm looking at this. My suggestion would be that people stay out of the way and let their insurance agency handle this rather than try to get involved and pull a gun on her and shoot her through the window or something like that. Again, not legal advice, and I ask you, in a situation like this, do you want to start shooting? I don't want to.
I mean, so here's the problem. Unless your crystal ball is working, I would feel very bad if I chose not to shoot if she runs over 10 children 2 blocks down the road.
Absolutely.
That's the problem. And it's not fair that you have to take that risk of not knowing when you make that decision. Because obviously, if you do stop her with deadly force, once more, the prosecutor's opening and closing arguments against you of, yeah, she was only doing property damage, people could easily evade her, there was no reason for deadly force. Those arguments write themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And it's unfortunate that that's kind of the way that is, but that's the way that is.
Yeah, and in a situation like that, you said it yourself, the prosecutor's arguments write themselves. The prosecutor is going to say, you didn't know that she was going to do this. And if my argument is, well, I think she could have, that we don't get to make the I think they could have argument, and it's not as powerful as the you didn't know argument.
At the end of the day, you have to show why, again, subject to your particular state's formulation, why you're in immediate or imminent fear of deadly, of death or great bodily harm or of deadly force, in essence. Articulating that danger for children 2 blocks down the road, is that going to be immediate or imminent? I think that's a stretch.
Yeah.
Okay. For the people right there in the parking lot who are evading her, I mean, the issue, again, to your earlier point, is if they're stepping out into traffic and into her way, kind of like a bullfighter, right? They didn't provoke it, but
they also didn't avoid it.
Right. But the argument from the prosecutor is, well, they put themselves in that situation. And again, nothing about this is fair. And in Tom's perfect justice system, we would try to consolidate less of the monopolization of force strictly to law enforcement. But we don't live in Tom's perfect justice system. And here in our justice system, where, having dealt with a lot of prosecutors over the years, there are some scary ones that I'd absolutely never in a million years want touching a defensive gun use case. And there's some others who I would trust to make very reasonable, rational calls. The problem is you don't know whose desk you're winding up on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Always great insight, Tom. Thank you very much for your help on this one.
Thanks, Kevin.
Do you carry with a round in the chamber? Because if you don't, you need to watch this video right next to me, because it's dangerous not to, and I'll explain why. Yes, you should carry with one in the chamber.